To inherit a fortune worth millions, he must first marry the school beauty. How do all the good things end up falling into your lap? Saito and Akane are arch rivals at school. They insult each other, yet they end up sleeping together at night. Who would have thought they'd get married young before even graduating high school? It all started 4 days ago, when Saito and Akane had another argument over a trivial matter in class. Akane's good friend Himari tried to mediate, puzzled why Akane always picked on Saito. This made Akane wonder too, as she seemed to get angry just from seeing Saito. Saito has a sister, Shisei, at school, who always comforts him when he's upset. Realizing this, Himari suddenly asked if Akane's constant nagging was because she cared about Saito. Embarrassed by her friend, Akane blurted out that she would never date Saito, even if he were the last man on earth. Coincidentally, Saito felt the same. After school, Saito was summoned by his grandfather for tea. Although he disliked his grandfather's authoritarian style, he had no choice since his grandfather controlled the family's finances. During Japan's economic downturn, it was his grandfather who transformed their struggling Hojo group into a world-class IT company. Despite being over 60, he still led the business from the front lines. Unexpectedly, Saito encountered Akane at the meeting, summoned by her grandmother. They started arguing again, but their grandparents were pleased to see them bickering, which reminded them of their own youth. At the dinner table, the couple never stopped talking, which made the elders reminisce about their younger days. Saito, uninterested in stories, asked bluntly what was the matter, only to hear both grandparents say in unison, "You two should get married." Saito and Akane thought they had misheard. Marry their mortal enemy? Was the world ending? It turned out that Saito's grandfather and Akane's grandmother had once been in love but never ended up together, each marrying someone else and living happily for decades. Now, with Saito's grandmother deceased for 10 years and Akane's grandfather also passed away, the elderly couple had reunited. Though they had enjoyed their lives, they still wished they had married from the start. Sadly, they could not turn back time, so they hoped their grandchildren would fulfill this dream. Hearing that she was being forced to marry Saito, Akane nearly cried. In her view, one should marry someone they truly love. Saito was shocked. Was his nemesis really so romantic? Of course, he also refused the marriage proposal. The grandparents were not surprised and revealed their trump card. With a clap, a subordinate brought in a stray dog, indicating that if Saito refused to marry, the Hojo group would be inherited by the dog, effectively cornering Saito. Then, Akane's grandmother pulled her aside and whispered something that softened Akane's stance. They were given 3 days to consider. After leaving the banquet, with tears in her eyes, Akane asked Saito what he planned to do. Saito found her distress quite endearing and asked what her grandmother had told her, but Akane refused to disclose it. Back home, Akane was conflicted. The reason she always opposed Saito was that he always outshone her. How could the second rank ever like the first rank? Unable to decide, she called her friend Himari, telling her about a friend who was being forced to marry someone she disliked due to family reasons, asking what she should do. Himari didn't hesitate to reply that she would refuse because she already had someone she liked and would only marry someone she loved. She didn't tell Akane who that person was. As for Akane's friend, if she didn't have someone she loved, marrying wouldn't really matter. Surprisingly, Akane was more concerned about having to do intimate things if she got married. Himari didn't mind this at all and even encouraged Akane, or rather her friend, to have more children. On the other hand, Saito was also suffering. The thought of marrying such a terrifying woman made him see a dark future. He could only confide in his sister Shisei, who sat on his lap and asked if he wanted to live freely or inherit the company. Naturally, he wanted both, but that wasn't possible. Shisei suggested choosing the company to live a better life first. She reassured him that even if he ended up scavenging for food, she would join him. No matter how difficult Saito's path might be, she would always stand by him. As the siblings were affectionate, Akane made her decision. 3 days later, they met with the grandparents again and unanimously agreed to marry. The elders were very pleased and even demanded they get married immediately. Everything was ready. The new house was prepared, their luggage had been moved in, and the marriage registration was complete. After leaving these instructions, the grandparents drove away. Left with no choice, they went inside to check out the house, which turned out to be quite luxurious. Saito instinctively locked the door. which Akane misinterpreted as him planning to take advantage of her. It wasn't hard to see why she might think that. The house was decorated like it was meant for a honeymoon. The bathroom was pink and plush, complete with a bubble bath. The elders' intentions were clear, and the bedroom had only one bed. Since they were married, sharing a bed seemed obvious. Hearing this from the grandfather, Saito felt uneasy and hurried to check for any hidden cameras in the bed, finding none. Akane was even more panicked, thinking Saito was a pervert who would ignore her protests for his own desires, keeping her up all night and making it impossible for her to go to school. To prevent Saito from getting his way, she carried a sharp pencil for self-defense. However, they still had to unpack. Just as she was about to go upstairs, she slipped and fell back into Saito's arms. The grandfather, showing some conscience, had ordered pizza for them. As Saito was about to eat, he saw Akane drooling over him, but she wasn't about to do something that only couples would do. Saito said they could still eat together even if they weren't a couple, but Akane misheard it as if he wanted to eat her. Saito was speechless and just handed her a slice to take back to her room. But the real problem came at night. They were forced to share the small bed. Despite trying to keep his distance, Saito could still feel the warmth from her back and the scent of her shampoo. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva, fearing he wouldn't last much longer. Akane, feeling vulnerable as the physically weaker one, repeatedly warned Saito not to make a move on her. She had never done anything intimate and had never even had a boyfriend. Fortunately, Saito is also inexperienced. Although their bodies are close, their hearts are far apart. For their own reasons, they must continue this marriage in name only. But Saito suddenly thought of a major problem. What if the grandparents asked them to have children? Akane panicked and curled up, accidentally ending up with Saito's hand on her buttocks. But really, Saito couldn't be blamed. It was just that the bed was too small. Just 3 days after marrying her archenemy, Akane surprisingly let Saito do as he pleased. The next morning, she threatened Saito never to reveal their marriage. But as soon as she entered the classroom, Himari asked her what she was chatting about with Saito. Akane awkwardly evaded the question, but their secret couldn't escape Saito's sister Shisei, who noticed the change in Saito's shampoo scent and the smell of a girl on him. She playfully bit Saito's neck and confidently asked if he was married. It turned out Shisei had investigated based on their grandfather's odd behavior, not only discovering Saito's marriage, but also that Akane was the bride. Shisei used this as leverage over Saito, though she hadn't yet decided what she wanted in return. After managing to deal with Shisei, Saito was confronted by Akane again, leading to another argument. Their classmates enjoyed their bickering, some even shipping them, thinking they were like a comedic married couple, unaware that they were actually married. That evening, Akane planned to store groceries in the fridge but found it packed with juices, all placed by Saito. To maintain a balanced diet, he had also stocked up on instant noodles and protein powder. Akane couldn't believe these could be considered cooking, and thought Saito was mad for trying so hard to convince himself that the awful-tasting drinks were palatable. Feeling it was too dangerous to let him continue, Akane decided to cook dinner herself, dreaming of Saito falling for her cooking. However, Saito was worried she might poison the food. His fears were unfounded. As it turned out, Akane could cook quite well. After inspecting the food and finding no suspicious items, he cautiously tried a bite, which unexpectedly brought back childhood memories. His compliment was merely that it was very ordinary, but to him, this carefully prepared ordinary meal was delicious. Not hearing the praise she expected, Akane snatched away Saito's meal, claiming she'd rather feed it to dogs than let him have any. Saito quickly grabbed it back and devoured it, ignoring Akane's cries, feeling utterly satisfied. The next morning, Akane called Saito to wake up. He, mistaking her for his sister as usual, pulled Akane into a hug and got punched for it. Akane also scolded him for not washing the dishes the previous night. Saito wasn't necessarily opposed to washing them. He just habitually waited several days to do it. This earned him another lecture from Akane. Besides not washing dishes, Saito also didn't take out the trash, leading to a concerning lifestyle for the cleanliness-loving Akane. Saito asked her not to interfere too much, causing both to worry about the sustainability of their marriage. That night, Saito's gaming disrupted Akane's studying. Coming out to see the screen display zombies, she was so scared that she immediately covered her eyes. The two then fought over the remote control. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was luggage sent to Saito, indicating that his grandfather was set on making him stay there. To be ready for more battles, Saito decided to take a bath, but upon opening the bathroom door, he found Akane asleep in the bathtub. He stepped out and closed the door, but realizing something was off, that she couldn't have slept through his entrance, he returned to try and wake her. It turned out she really was asleep, even talking in her sleep about Saito kneeling to apologize. As Akane began to slip, Saito rushed to support her, and both ended up on the floor, making a loud noise that finally woke her. Opening her eyes to see her naked archenemy was too much. Her first thought was that Saito had finally made a move. She yelled and chased him out, at a loss for words. Akane was furious at being seen naked by her own husband, but later calmed down, considering the possibility that she had accidentally fallen asleep in the tub and that Saito might have been trying to rescue her. So after getting into bed, Akane hesitantly tried to ask Saito for clarification, but Saito said he was going to sleep. Akane couldn't say anything and was sullen until the next day, bursting into tears when a friend showed concern. She confided in Himari, mentioning someone she had a strained relationship with, but wanted to get along better. Himari immediately guessed it was Saito, but Akane quickly denied it. Himari suggested that Akane should communicate properly with the person. On the other side, Saito couldn't help but vent to his sister about how living with Akane was like hell. Shisei suggested he get a divorce, but Saito disagreed. He had sacrificed too much already and was determined to take over the Hojo Corporation. Realizing this, he decided he had to try to get along with Akane. Shisei advised him to give Akane some leeway, noting that if he wanted to be the company's president, he would need to act similarly with others. Saito saw the sense in her words and decided to talk to Akane that day. However, upon opening the door, he saw an angry Akane and thought about postponing the talk. Unexpectedly, Akane pulled him aside, wanting to have a serious conversation. They both agreed to talk calmly due to their significant differences in personality and lifestyle. They decided to establish some ground rules both could accept. First, they agreed to share household chores since Akane had been doing all the work. Saito explained his habit of accumulating clothes and dishes before cleaning them, but Akane pointed out this could breed bacteria. Saito had to compromise on this. Akane then asked if he had any requests of her. Surprisingly, what concerned Saito the most was physical contact. Their bed was too small, so he hoped Akane could tolerate accidental touches. Akane acknowledged that some contact was inevitable, and sadly said that while Saito could touch her body on the bed, he absolutely must not put his hands under the covers. Thus, they set some rules and agreed to verbally express their gratitude to each other, as it would help improve their relationship. Akane immediately demanded that next time Saito must compliment her cooking, as she was hurt by his previous description of her carefully prepared meals as ordinary. Unbeknownst to her, ordinary was actually a compliment from Saito, but he didn't bother explaining and simply agreed to her request. Akane quickly called Himari to update her, thinking the issue was temporarily resolved. Hearing Saito's footsteps, she hung up, lied down, and told Saito he could touch her body, although Saito never intended to touch her deliberately. To show appreciation for Akane's care, Saito and his sister picked out a small fruitcake for her, knowing she liked fruitcakes because she mentioned it in a school publication in the first grade. Though Akane found Saito's memory almost unnerving, she expressed her gratitude and prepared a lavish dinner in thanks. Saito sincerely praised her cooking. Once they stopped arguing, the atmosphere around them was filled with a rosy glow, and they even washed dishes together. It was then that Saito realized how beautiful Akane's smile was. The relationship between Saito and Akane was improving. One evening, Akane even invited Saito to watch a cat documentary together. Although Saito wasn't interested, he ended up watching with her for 3 hours. Afterward, feeling a bit embarrassed, Akane suggested watching a movie Saito liked next time. But Saito preferred gaming over movies. Akane claimed she wasn't interested in games, yet she got hooked after just half an hour of playing. Saito was surprised to find himself enjoying such a pleasant time with his former rival. Later that night, he even covered Akane with a blanket, only to find she wasn't asleep, and took the opportunity to ask Saito to call her by her first name. After calling each other by their first names, both slept peacefully. At school, Akane stopped picking fights like before, which puzzled Himari. When did these two get along so well? Akane denied any close relationship with Saito. but accidentally called him by his first name. On the other side, Saito's sister Shisei noticed her brother reading a book about social interactions. Embarrassed, Saito admitted he wanted to improve his relationship with Akane. The book suggested that completing tasks together could strengthen relationships, so he invited Akane to go somewhere after school. Akane's first thought was, "Isn't this a date?" Saito quickly denied it, saying they were just going shopping. They agreed to meet after school, but just as school ended, Himari approached Akane, inviting her to her favorite parfait shop. Tempted, Akane decisively refused, saying she already had plans with someone Himari knew. Himari realized it must be Saito and suspected a date, deciding to join in. However, Akane refused and hurriedly escaped, accidentally stepping on Shisei, who was lying there on purpose. Confused by Shisei's logic, Akane quickly made an excuse and fled. After dodging several obstacles, Akane finally reached the school gate, reminding herself it wasn't a date. They were just shopping for necessities. Just then, Saito arrived. Typically, Akane handled the shopping since there was a store near their home. They went there as they needed some everyday groceries. Saito picked up a carton of eggs, but Akane reminded him to watch the price. There was no need for expensive eggs. In her element, Akane reliably compared prices and ingredients, aiming for the best value. They even caught a supermarket sale on chicken breasts. Akane handed her backpack to Saito and dove into the crowd. Unfortunately, the two high schoolers couldn't outmaneuver the fierce competition from the aunties. Still, Akane was determined to win next time, insisting Saito must join her in the fray next time, causing him to blush. On the way home, Saito couldn't help but praise Akane's practicality, commenting she'd make a great wife one day. Akane thought he was mocking her, forgetting they were already married. In the middle of the night, Akane woke up to find Saito so close and thought he had finally crossed a line. Saito quickly explained that she had moved in her sleep, and he hadn't moved to avoid waking her. He admitted he wanted to touch her cheek because she looked so cute sleeping. Akane, realizing the direct approach was best with Saito, even offered him a chance to touch her cheek before lying back down. And Saito managed to keep his composure. After waking up the next morning, both Saito and Akane felt a bit awkward. Akane, still troubled by the events of the previous night, accidentally burned the toast. Hearing the commotion, Saito rushed out from the bathroom not even fully dressed. However, Akane wasn't as surprised by this anymore, and Saito had started to proactively fulfill Akane's needs. Noticing Akane eyeing a poster for new bread, he immediately went and bought one for them to share. Unfortunately, Himari caught them in the act. Akane still didn't want others to know about their relationship and ended up arguing with Saito again, but the observant Himari had already seen through everything. They soon had another quiz at school. Akane had been studying late every day while Saito, who always scored perfectly, seemed to do nothing. He even claimed he wouldn't study just for an exam, which led to an angry Akane kicking him out of the study room. Nevertheless, the thoughtful Saito made a strawberry sandwich for Akane as a midnight snack, which turned out to be quite delicious. Fueled by the food, Akane felt more energized to study. Despite her lack of sleep and nearly fainting, she refused to rest, determined to outperform Saito in the upcoming exam, or eventually in the future. Himari reminded her that there was only 1 year left in high school and questioned if she planned to chase Saito to university if she didn't win. This made it sound as if Akane really admired Saito. That night, Saito brought another sandwich for Akane, but found her asleep with a feverishly hot forehead. He quickly carried her back to bed and discovered her temperature had soared to 40 degrees Celsius, with her body covered in cold sweat. Saito wiped her down with a towel, but even in her weakened state, Akane's mind was still on studying. She revealed her dream of becoming a doctor so her loved ones could be healthy, but her family couldn't afford medical school. Thus, she had made a deal with her grandmother. If she married Saito, her grandmother would pay for her education. Despite her efforts, she couldn't surpass the seemingly carefree Saito, filling her with resentment yet also admiration. Realizing what she had revealed, Akane became even more embarrassed, causing her temperature to spike to 42 degrees Celsius. Saito felt they needed to get to a hospital immediately, but Akane refused, seeing it as a waste of medical resources for just a fever. With no taxis available, Saito decided to carry her, unable to stand seeing his wife in pain. Akane's heart fluttered as Saito comforted her while running to the hospital, and she began to think that marrying her nemesis might not be so unbearable after all. A week later, Akane had recovered. She called Saito to wake up, wearing an apron, obviously having just made breakfast, giving off a vibe of an old married couple. However, upon arriving at school, Saito was flirted with by a blonde guy, Akane's good friend, Himari. This enraged Akane, who stormed over to remind Saito that now that he had her, he shouldn't be so close with other girls. Saito and Akane were getting along better and better, and Akane even began preparing bento for Saito. Just as he opened it at lunchtime, Shisei suddenly appeared, trying to snatch his bento under the pretext that as an older brother, he was obligated to feed his sister. Saito, naturally unwilling to share his beloved wife's bento, faced Shisei's act of playing the victim, which quickly garnered sympathy from other classmates who criticized him, asking, "What's wrong with sharing a little with your sister?" Having no choice, Saito agreed to share a bite. At that moment, Himari noticed something odd. Why did Saito and Akane's bentos look exactly alike? This sparked gossip among the classmates, speculating that Akane might have made Saito's bento too, and wondering if they were actually dating. Both of them denied in unison, saying they weren't dating because they were already married. However, they couldn't explain why their food was identical. Luckily, Shisei resolved this by quickly eating all the bento, which prevented any further comparison. Saito then gently patted his sister on the head. However, Himari still had doubts and took the opportunity to ask Saito alone if his bento was really made by Akane. Saito explained that they just used the same semi-prepared ingredients and reiterated that they were not dating. Himari was relieved and offered to help clear up the misunderstanding with their classmates. Shisei witnessed all this. That night, Akane was awakened by rustling noises and saw a shadowy figure behind the curtain. She screamed, waking Saito and pointing out the ghost. Saito saw nothing and went back to sleep. Akane insisted on staying awake and sought comfort in his arms. The next day, she saw the shadow again while studying in her room and heard footsteps in the living room. Saito suggested she take a photo with her phone, but Akane refused, claiming the phone could explode due to ghostly interference, so she decided to study in Saito's study instead. Saito, not wanting her to stay there alone, had to accompany her everywhere, even to the bathroom. Misunderstanding the situation, people might think it was an invitation. Saito, unable to resist the temptation, stood guard at the bathroom door, which had a glass door through which he could faintly see Akane's silhouette. He turned away and recited calming mantras. But when he didn't respond immediately, Akane, thinking he had left, opened the door naked to look for him. Such incidents were countless, and Saito was exhausted. He went to his sister for comfort. Shisei, fully supportive, opened her arms for him to indulge in sibling affection, promising to embrace all aspects of him. Saito lifted Shisei, telling her to stop the nonsense before discussing the ghostly issues at home. Akane was terrified, thinking their home was haunted and unable to do anything alone. Shisei immediately took on a detective role, offering to uncover the truth. Alone in the classroom with Akane, Shisei confessed that she knew everything, claiming she had figured it out herself, and it wasn't related to her brother. Akane believed her and felt embarrassed for keeping secrets from her sister-in-law. Hearing that Shisei wanted to help with the ghost, she was even more grateful. Seeing her innocence, Shisei tricked her by saying if the ghost wasn't exorcised soon, Akane's grades might drop by 50 points. The method of exorcism, Shisei claimed, needed further investigation. Akane was now completely compliant. The couple then brought Shisei to their house, where she used the excuse of searching for evil spirits to explore their new home. She first investigated Saito's erotic study and found a pair of underwear that didn't smell like him, indicating they were washed. Disappointed, Shisei moved on to Akane's study, which had nothing unusual, and then to their bedroom, where Akane always saw a shadowy figure resembling a child. Whenever Akane shouted, the shadow disappeared. Shisei, piecing together the clues, fell into deep thought. Saito trusted his sister's intellect to solve the mystery, and soon enough, Shisei declared that she was the ghost. Based on the timing, location, and behavior of the sightings, there was no doubt the ghost was Shisei, who had visited their house days earlier with a key from their grandfather. She had kept it a secret not to disturb their romantic nights. The couple was speechless, the detective turning out to be the culprit. However, Shisei praised Akane's cooking as the best in the world, which delighted Akane so much that she prepared a large meal in her honor. Shisei ate heartily, getting food on her face, which Saito naturally wiped off. Akane, watching them, felt something was off, thinking their closeness was a bit too much for siblings. Saito continued playing video games with Shisei, who even sat on his lap, having him teach her how to play hands-on. Later, they even mentioned that they usually bathed together. Akane was incredulous and insisted they bathe separately from now on. The siblings complied obediently. Tonight, Shisei was staying over, and by the time Akane finished her bath and returned to her room, Saito had already prepared the guest bedding for Shisei, telling her to go to sleep after finishing her game. Now, the couple finally had some alone time. Akane took this opportunity to express everything she had been hesitant to say in front of Shisei. Blushing, Akane confessed she wanted to be the first to play it with him. It turned out she was jealous of his sister. The conversation led to a small argument, which they found relieving. Akane then, with a flushed face, tried to remind Saito to maintain a distance from Shisei, but struggled to articulate it. Just then, she felt a touch on her bottom, followed by a touch on Saito's thigh. Both thought the other was being playful, only to find Shisei emerging between them, insisting she sleep with her brother, as they used to share a bed during her previous overnight visits. She added that if Akane wasn't comfortable, she would sleep on the floor and not interfere with their intimate moments. With things having come to this point, Akane felt compelled to plead with Shisei to stay and sleep with them. Shisei, astute as ever, realized Akane was jealous because of her close relationship with her brother, which made Akane upset. However, Shisei found this amusing. She had been worried about whether her brother would find happiness, but now she felt reassured. After saying this, she snuggled back into Saito's arms and fell soundly asleep. Why did the tsundere Akane become good friends with Himari? It was largely due to Himari's persistent pestering and finally winning her over with a parfait. Now, Himari shockingly said she wanted to pursue Akane's husband. One day, Himari suddenly asked Akane if she liked Saito, then confessed her own feelings for him, saying she admired him, especially his calm response during a sports event when a friend fainted and everyone else panicked. Himari endlessly praised Saito's qualities to Akane, eventually hoping Akane would help set them up. Surprisingly, Akane agreed. Back home, she observed Saito closely and directly asked him about his preference in girls. Saito didn't have specific preferences in women, but he did in food. He loved medium-rare steak. Akane then mischievously told Himari that he liked raw meat and raw garlic, which made Himari think her crush had a wild side, feeling even closer to him. Why did Akane know so much? She awkwardly dodged the question. That evening, when Akane told Saito they were having fish, he was visibly disappointed, having hoped for a medium-rare steak after her detailed questions earlier. Seeing Saito's anticipation, Akane felt responsible for her words and went shopping with him the next day, deepening their couple's vibe. Saito couldn't stop praising the steak Akane made, a stark contrast to his usual tough demeanor. Akane couldn't believe it and suspected a trap, but Saito explained the steak was so good he wanted it every day, as if they were already married, which they were. Akane assured him she would continue to cook for him. As Akane and Saito's relationship warmed, Himari began her own move, asking Saito what type of girl he liked. Saito said that love should not be about types, but about getting to know someone deeply. His genuine-sounding praises charmed Himari, who blushed and jokingly asked how he saw her, but quickly fled after asking. After Himari left, Shisei teased that Saito was giving off a ready-to-mate vibe. Meanwhile, Akane sneaked into Saito's room while he was gaming and found a secret notebook. She was about to peek when Saito entered, so she quickly asked for a book recommendation instead. Saito suggested A History of Humanity Through Food and Weapons, which Akane relayed to Himari. However, Himari didn't understand it, but saw a perfect reason to ask Saito for help. Watching them converse comfortably, Akane felt uneasy. But Saito's kindness to Himari was partly because whenever Akane argued with him, Himari was there to mediate. The conversation naturally turned to Akane, revealing how she had helped Himari against bullies in their childhood, complimenting her beautiful hair. Akane felt embarrassed hearing Himari praise her in front of Saito. Suddenly, Shisei popped in, asking if Akane was bothered by Himari and Saito's relationship, noting Himari's look whenever she saw Saito. Akane, struggling to find an excuse, insisted that Himari was too good for Saito. After their chat, Himari felt hopeful about pursuing Saito and decided to buy Akane's favorite strawberry tart as a thank you and planned a long chat at Akane's house. Akane was about to agree when she remembered she was living with Saito. She couldn't refuse her friend and told Saito to tidy up quickly. Before they could finish, Himari arrived eagerly with desserts. Saito had to hide in the kitchen as Akane stalled. Himari then asked if she could invite Saito on a date, believing Akane had liked him since high school and wouldn't interfere if Akane also had feelings for him. Akane vehemently denied any affection, accidentally disparaging Saito, which left him feeling bitter in the kitchen. The next day, Himari bravely asked Saito out on a date. Saito felt honored, while Akane listened from outside. Shisei teased her, questioning if she really wasn't going to stop them. Akane still wouldn't admit her true feelings and stubbornly wished Himari happiness. That evening, Saito told Akane about the date invitation, feeling it necessary to consult his wife. Akane, flustered, blurted out that their marriage was merely to fulfill each other's wishes and that his dating life didn't concern her. Saito felt disheartened, but didn't say much, only reminding Akane before leaving the next morning that he wouldn't go if she stopped him. Akane remained tough, only to rush and block him at the last moment, tearfully confessing she didn't want to see him shopping happily with another girl, even if only formally, as he was still her husband. Relieved to hear this, Saito revealed he had already declined Himari's invitation, having only used it to confirm whether Akane really disliked him. After breakfast, he playfully suggested going grocery shopping together. Himari greeted Saito as usual the next day. She had persisted similarly when initially trying to befriend Akane and was confident she could win Saito over. Overhearing this, Akane impulsively remarked, "I won't give up either." The next day, Himari brought Saito a homemade raw meat lunch, a misunderstanding caused by Akane's misinformation. Saito declined, but pressured by peers, reluctantly accepted. Surprisingly, the meat tasted good. It looked raw, but was actually cooked. Himari fed Saito piece by piece, which Akane couldn't stand. Himari then fed her too. Saito, always top of the class, was invited by Himari to a study group at her house. Akane intervened, so Himari invited her as well. With the top 3 students present, they all gathered at Akane and Saito's house. Starting from first grade math, Saito helped Himari understand concepts that had confused her at school. Himari praised Saito as a genius, and their closeness ignited Akane's fury. Shisei, always clingy to her brother, didn't consider Akane a legitimate wife. They took a break and played poker, with Saito winning decisively and stepping out to buy desserts, leaving the others to continue playing. Akane followed, teasing him about his exaggerated memory skills, which he thought might disgust her. Explaining his family's unusual mental abilities, Saito remarked he could remember trivial personal details, which often repulsed friends and family. However, Akane expressed envy, wishing she could remember details to better care for others. Saito was touched by her praise. When they returned, Himari and Shisei were busy gaming. Himari was surprised Akane would buy such a game, not knowing it was Saito's. Akane brushed it off and invited them for tea and snacks. Now completely smitten, Himari hoped to host the next study session at Saito's, but he tried to find an excuse to refuse. Accidentally spilling tea on himself, Saito quickly fetched a cloth, piquing Himari's curiosity about his knowledge of its location. While Shisei took Himari to clean up, Akane scolded Saito for being too close to Himari and neglecting to teach her. Their argument was interrupted by a power outage. Akane, frightened, clung to Saito, seizing the moment to ask if he preferred straightforward girls. Saito avoided a direct answer, assuring her that being herself was enough, and then showered her with compliments. Power returned just as Himari and Shisei re-entered, finding Akane clinging to Saito's arm, relieved at their apparent closeness. After that, whenever Himari encountered a problem she didn't understand, she would enthusiastically seek Saito's help. Not to be outdone, Akane asked Saito to teach her at home after he returned. Saito shared his knowledge freely. Although he never studied himself, his experimental teaching methods were highly effective for Akane, and she had the best results among those he had tested. Akane studied so intensely that she neglected sleep. Saito didn't understand why she was so diligent and wanted to know more about his wife. Akane revealed that she had a sister who was chronically ill and bedridden since childhood. Her parents worked tirelessly to pay for medical expenses, while Akane could only watch her sister suffer, which motivated her to become a doctor to help others like her sister, even though her sister had already passed away. This made Akane envious of Saito, who always spent time doing various activities with his sister Shisei. After sharing this, Akane became very somber. To cheer her up, Saito consulted Shisei, who suggested taking his sister-in-law to trendy shops or dessert cafes, having noticed Akane's girlish interests. Saito then invited Akane out, and she excitedly accepted and shared the news with her grandmother. Overjoyed to hear about their progress, her grandmother immediately took her to a special dressing room filled with various cute lingerie. Akane blushed and insisted she didn't need it, but her grandmother jokingly remarked that going without underwear on a first date might be too bold. Eventually, Akane emerged looking entirely refreshed, stunning Saito. Although both insisted it wasn't a date, it certainly seemed like one. Their first stop was a cat cafe, but Akane was on the blacklist there for being overly enthusiastic with the cats on a previous visit. Next, they went to a karaoke bar. Akane, having heard from Himari that kissing often happens during karaoke dates, worried Saito might make a move. Saito reminded her they weren't on a date, and they ended up having a great time singing together. Afterwards, Saito bought Akane a drink, which she enjoyed so much that she offered him a sip, knowing it was like an indirect kiss, but he declined. In a rare, quiet moment, Akane curiously asked why Saito wanted to take her out. He confessed that he felt responsible for making her recall her painful memories about her sister and wanted to lift her spirits. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Akane promised to follow him wherever he wanted to go next. They ended up at the only nutritional supplement tasting store in the country. Saito started sampling the pills enthusiastically, while Akane tried to stop him. But fortunately, thanks to her regular feeding him delicious food, he could no longer go back to plain protein shakes. On their way home, as they passed a store, Akane was drawn to a ring in the display. Saito offered to buy it, but it was priced beyond what high schoolers could afford. Akane immediately declined, but she was still grateful to Saito for the day out and gave him her sweetest smile, leaving him utterly captivated. Akane started throwing a tantrum at home again because Saito hadn't sincerely praised the meal she cooked. Saito sighed helplessly, wondering why they had reverted to their old ways after getting along so well before. He remembered that Akane had been eyeing a ring and thought buying it might cheer her up. So, after school, Saito visited Shisei's home, where Shisei began changing clothes right in front of her brother and pretended to be a vampire, playfully biting Saito's neck. Saito's aunt caught them and scolded them for not including her in their antics. After some chaos, Saito mentioned he was looking for a job to buy a gift, which displeased his aunt, who reminded him of his duty to inherit the Hojo family business, especially since he was just forced to marry a commoner's daughter. Despite her disapproval of the marriage, she still found Saito a job translating a rare language, which he needed to learn in 3 days. Saito boasted he could learn it overnight, quickly absorbing all available materials on the language and planning to solidify his memory with a night's sleep. Hearing this, Akane whimsically wished she could keep him inside her, though her comment sounded odd. Curious about his sudden interest in a foreign language and wanting to surprise her, Saito did not reveal the reason. He spent several days going home with Shisei, who clung to him constantly, either sitting on his lap or kissing his neck. Since Saito's marriage, the siblings had less time together, and Shisei felt lonely, so Saito indulged her affections and even slept holding her. When he returned to his new villa, he faced Akane's questioning but did not explain himself, choosing to simply go to bed. However, Akane detected a girl's fragrance on him. Embarrassed to confront Saito directly, she consulted her grandmother, who recognized her granddaughter's jealousy and reminisced about her own youthful hesitations that caused her to miss out on Saito's grandfather. She hoped Akane wouldn't make the same mistake. Meanwhile, Akane was also comforting Himari, as Saito had once again declined a date with her. When Shisei passed by, Akane recognized the familiar scent on her, suspecting Saito had been with Shisei recently. That evening, Saito didn't return for dinner, and while Akane claimed it made things easier, her grandmother's words haunted her. Despite not having exchanged contact details with Saito, she dug out the phone book and called Shisei's house. Confirming Saito was there, she asked the maid to transfer the call, but ended up speaking to Saito's aunt, who said Saito was busy and refused Akane's call, stressing that what Saito was doing was none of Akane's business, and that they shouldn't care too much about each other due to their forced marriage. Stung by the mention of a fake marriage, Akane hung up abruptly. On the other side, Saito completed his job and eagerly bought the ring Akane had admired. Upon returning home, he was confronted by an angry Akane who accused him of being overly intimate with Shisei or engaging in improper activities, even suggesting he marry Shisei so he could inherit the family business regardless of who took over. Saito clarified that his relationship with Shisei was not romantic and quickly presented the ring, explaining he had been working late as a translator. Akane realized she had misunderstood Saito when he expressed his desire to improve their relationship. She shyly ran back to her room, then peeked out to say, "Thank you." The next morning, she was up early, admiring the ring and couldn't stop admiring it. Saito also commented that it suited her well. To thank Saito, Akane made his favorite steak for dinner, which he enjoyed so much he thought he could eat no more meat. At school, just after encountering Himari, Saito pulled Akane aside to remind her to keep the ring from being seen. Akane put the ring in her purse, but Shisei saw this and insisted that Akane give her the ring, offering to buy an identical one as a replacement. Of course, Akane refused. Unfortunately, she discovered the ring was missing after school. Akane searched everywhere from home to school but couldn't find it. She considered buying an identical ring but immediately dismissed the idea. The ring Saito gave her was unique and symbolized his love. Determined to find it before Saito noticed, Akane spent several days searching alone. Shisei noticed and offered to help, not wanting their home to become a battleground again, and wishing for Saito to have a peaceful life because she cared deeply for her brother. Despite their efforts, the ring remained lost. Akane didn't want to trouble Shisei further or tell Saito about it, so Shisei took it upon herself to act. While Akane was still outside searching, Shisei went to their house to tell Saito. She suggested he follow Akane if he wanted to know what she had been up to lately. The next day after school, Saito discreetly followed Akane and saw her searching for something, noticing that the ring was missing from her finger. It started raining heavily, and Saito stepped forward to hold an umbrella over Akane, telling her it was enough and to come home, saying they could always buy another ring. However, Akane insisted that it wasn't something that could just be bought again. Although their marriage was arranged, the ring was genuinely from Saito's heart, his first gift bought with his own money, making it irreplaceable. Moved by Akane's words, Saito couldn't remain indifferent. He accessed his memory from that day and led Akane to the entrance of a cafe she had hesitated at while checking her purse. There, at the sewer grate where she stood, Saito recovered Akane's ring from the sewage. Overwhelmed with emotion, Akane hugged him and tearfully thanked him. Saito personally put the ring back on her left ring finger. Akane felt this was perfect, unaware of the new troubles they were about to face. Someone had returned to the country. Maho transferred to Saito's school and immediately sought him out for a relationship. However, Saito knew nothing about this younger student, while Maho seemed to know everything about him, including Himari's confession and his cohabitation with Akane. This information overwhelmed Saito, prompting him to demand to know who she was. Maho remained silent, persistently urging him to date her and even threatening him. Luckily, Shisei appeared in time to protect her brother's virtue, only for herself to be toyed with by Maho. After that, Maho continued to pester Saito, even going to his class and turning him into the enemy of all the boys there, forcing him to leave with Maho quickly. Unexpectedly, the young girl deliberately slid down the stairs and ended up in Saito's arms. Saito couldn't understand what Maho liked about him, especially since he had never been in love. Maho quickly latched onto his words, questioning how he could live with Akane if he didn't like her. She then suggested they start a passionate romance. Maho relentlessly invited Saito for desserts, but ended up eating burgers instead, claiming junk food was the tastiest, a sentiment Saito agreed with. As they talked, they found common ground. Maho had an older sister and was a sister control freak, much like Saito was with his younger sister. Suddenly, she sucked on Saito's finger and took a photo, claiming she was helping him clean it. Saito asked Maho to delete the photo, but she ran away and hid in an alley, soon found by Saito, who made her delete the photo. Despite this, Saito agreed to take her shopping. However, After shopping, Maho was not satisfied and wanted to go home with Saito for more intimate interaction, threatening to reveal his cohabitation with Akane if he refused. Saito had no choice but to take her home. Akane opened the door to find her husband cuddling with another woman. Before Saito could explain, Akane asked why he was with her sister. Saito was shocked, watching Maho, who had been clinging to him, suddenly jump into Akane's arms and become overly familiar with her. Akane seemed to dote on her sister, confusing Saito, who thought Akane's sister was deceased, only to learn she had just been abroad. Without time to explain further, Maho was eager to inspect her sister's married life, rushing into the bedroom and discovering 2 pillows on the small bed. Furious at the thought of this man taking her sister's virginity, Maho began hitting Saito. Akane quickly clarified that nothing had happened between them. To prevent any misunderstanding, Maho decided to stay overnight to monitor them, insisting Akane cook for her. When Akane opened the fridge, they found Shisei nearly frozen inside, needing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, which Maho volunteered to do. Unfortunately for her, Shisei only had eyes for Saito. The scene turned chaotic as the 2 sisters began competing to prove who was the better sister for Saito. Maho went first, touching Saito's chest and promising to do great things for him if he considered her as a sister. Saito rated her 0. Then it was Shisei's turn. She deliberately fell, showing her thighs, and asked for a hug, which left Saito utterly smitten, giving her a perfect score. Maho admitted defeat, even wanting to take Shisei home as her sister. After some commotion, Akane and her sister Maho finally had some time alone. However, Maho immediately suggested she marry Saito, arguing that the grandparents' intention was to unite the families through marriage to make up for past regrets. Maho proposed she could marry into the family as well. Akane, not wanting to push her sister into an undesirable situation, listed all of Saito's flaws, but Maho saw these as positives. She even showed a candid photo of her and Saito, arguing that it proved they got along well and could be a happy couple after marriage. After speaking, she went to develop her relationship with Saito. Akane felt a sense of loss, unable to pinpoint why she felt uncomfortable. She should have been happy to be freed from the marriage. Meanwhile, Maho had stripped down and run into the bathroom, intending to bond with Saito under the pretense of washing his back. Saito had never bathed with Akane or Shisei, and his first time bathing with a beautiful girl was with his wife's sister. In the bathroom, Maho made an offer. If they married, she would fulfill all his desires. She pressed her naked body against Saito's back, testing his restraint. Maho added fuel to the fire by saying Akane would never do something like this, and Saito shockingly said he would consider it. After leaving the bathroom feeling exhausted, Saito didn't mention what had happened to Akane. It wasn't until Akane suddenly asked him if he wanted a divorce that they began to truly examine their actual feelings for each other. Today, Saito went to the amusement park with a group of beautiful girls. Maho was constantly clinging to her brother-in-law, which even Himari noticed was odd. The two quickly became rivals in love. However, not long after entering the park, both tried to seduce Saito with a splash, getting themselves soaked. Then, everyone except Akane enjoyed a ride on the roller coaster. Akane emerged looking like a robot, clearly terrified of heights. This fear was evident when they rode the Ferris wheel, where she visibly tensed up and broke down when Saito spoke to her. It turned out that Akane was afraid of most rides in the park. Saito wondered why she insisted on coming if that was the case. It was simply because Akane wanted to make her sister happy. Maho, unlike her sister, enjoyed the thrill and loved being lively and noisy with friends. Akane, having been bedridden as a child, wanted to fulfill her sister's wishes and spend as much time with her as possible while she was in Japan. Saito, understanding this sibling affection, held Akane's hand to ease her fear. Later, the group ventured into a haunted house. Akane, terrified, left halfway through, crying. Himari and Shisei stayed outside to comfort her, leaving Saito and Maho inside. Maho was not only unafraid, but even posed for a photo with a zombie, showing no respect for the staff. She particularly enjoyed seeing the other girls scared. However, the intense day of activities was too much for Maho, and Saito ended up carrying her out. No sooner had he set her down on a bench than Maho sprang up, lively again, claiming she just wanted her brother-in-law to carry her. Saito asked her not to joke like that in the future, worrying that he might not believe her if she were truly unwell one day. Realizing Saito was a bit upset, Maho tried to prove how healthy she was but accidentally fell into her brother-in-law's arms. And in that moment, she felt a real flutter of the heart. Last night, Saito returned to his room only to find not his wife, but her sister, Maho, wearing a sheer dress and sitting atop him. Unmoved, Saito asked her an unrelated question about whether she had attended a party hosted by his grandfather, as she reminded him of a girl he had met there. Maho revealed that she was that girl and suggested they should take their relationship further that night. As she began unbuttoning his pajamas, despite her claims of affection, Saito could sense that Maho actually disliked him. Surprisingly, she admitted it, but insisted it didn't matter and was determined to go through with her plan. Just then, Akane walked in. Although nothing had happened yet, Maho provocatively told her sister she had taken full advantage of Saito, infuriating Akane, who blurted out her hatred for both Saito and Maho. Maho was driven out of the house, and as it was raining, Saito found her outside with an umbrella. Unable to return home and not wanting to trouble Shisei, Saito decided they should stay at a hotel. He initially refused to let Maho in, but she threatened to scream that he had brought her to a hotel without her parents' permission. Reluctantly, he let her in. Inside, Maho's antics led to her breaking down and crying, asking if Saito would hate her too. Saito realized the impact of Akane's words was severe. Maho had never seen her sister genuinely angry before. As Maho cried uncontrollably, she began to undress, feeling responsible for Saito being kicked out and thinking she had to repay him physically. Saito, of course, did nothing but eventually calmed her, and they went to sleep. In the early hours, Maho began gasping for air, having not taken her medication. It turned out her illness was still severe and required daily medication. Saito rushed to call an ambulance, but Maho stopped him, not wanting to involve her family or escalate the situation. She insisted her doctor had allowed her to live normally. Respecting her wishes, Saito didn't call an ambulance but carried her to the hospital himself. It ended with Maho needing to be hospitalized, and her parents were on their way. As Saito prepared to leave, Maho reminded him not to tell Akane, not wanting to cause her sister any more trouble. Akane had always taken care of her sick sister Maho, which prevented her from doing what she really wanted. Maho didn't want her sister to sacrifice anymore, and Saito agreed to her wishes. Still feeling awkward about returning home, Saito called Shisei to ask if he could stay with him for a few days. However, as soon as he arrived at school, Akane confronted him, demanding to know where her sister was. Maho hadn't been to school since that night, and their parents only said she had gone traveling again. Akane didn't believe this, as Maho would have said goodbye to her first. Now, Maho wasn't answering her phone or messages, which worried Akane greatly. Despite this, Saito remembered Maho's request and told Akane nothing, only visiting Maho after school each day. Maho had always feared her illness would return and that she might die unexpectedly, which is why she rushed to do what she wanted while she could move. Her frequent travels abroad were also to prevent Akane from discovering her worsening condition. Curiously, Saito asked if her seduction was also for Akane's sake. Initially, he thought Maho was just jealous and wanted to win back her sister's attention, but he later realized that wasn't the case. Maho simply wanted her sister to be happy. She had heard about Saito from Akane and knew he was the last man Akane would want to marry. Maho thought it better to take her sister's place to ensure Akane could pursue her desires. However, her actions had angered Akane, and Maho wondered if their relationship could ever be repaired. Saito comforted Maho, assuring her that Akane still loved her deeply and that she should focus on recovering to see her sister. He promised to stay by her side, hoping for Maho's happiness. When Saito opened the hospital room door, he was surprised to find Akane there. His last words about hoping for Akane's happiness echoed in her ears, leaving her puzzled about his intentions. Soon after, Maho was discharged from the hospital. Eager to apologize to her sister, she explained everything, assuring Akane that nothing inappropriate had occurred between her and Saito. As her sister, Akane naturally forgave her, deciding to bear the burden of marrying Saito alone. However, Maho then confessed her real feelings for Saito, which infuriated Akane, who accused Saito of seducing her sister and threatened violence. Saito solemnly apologized to Akane, who then asked if his previous statement in the hospital was true. Blushing, Saito admitted it was, and Akane, unusually open, admitted she was happy and reminded him it was time to come home, lest their grandmother find out. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation was overheard by Himari, who was standing behind them. Himari finally found out that Saito and Akane were living together, and so did their classmates. Akane quickly denied it, hurling insults at Saito and claiming she couldn't possibly live with such a disgusting person. However, the classmates wouldn't listen to any explanations, having already suspected something. They had seen the two together in the commercial district before. Cornered, the pair ran off to discuss their options, but just ended up arguing. The next day, Saito felt like he was being followed. To lose the follower, he grabbed Shisei and teleported onto a bus, not getting off until the final stop. They then discovered there would be no more buses until the next day, and that there was no signal to call a driver to pick them up. Unexpectedly, a little maid drove up because Shisei had a tracker on him. Lately, Saito and Akane had been too scared to go out, and they had run out of rice at home. Then they heard a strange noise upstairs. Upon checking, they found a big bulge under their bed covers. Akane, frightened, picked up a baseball bat ready to strike, but Saito stopped her. In the midst of their struggle, they both fell onto the bed just as Maho walked in and started taking photos. Not only Maho came, but she also brought Himari, who had come to apologize to Saito and Akane. If she hadn't spoken out in the classroom, the classmates wouldn't have known, so she felt responsible for helping to suppress the rumors. Akane also felt awkward, having kept the secret from her good friend Himari. Himari quickly reassured them it was okay, admitting she had sensed they might be living together, as they often brought the same lunch and their shampoo smelled the same. Saito explained everything, emphasizing that he and Akane were in a marriage without romantic feelings. Knowing this was enough for Himari, as it meant she still had a chance. Then Maho stepped forward, ready to plan a meeting to quash the rumors. Shisei suggested capturing the students spreading the rumors and wiping their memories, which Akane agreed with, but Saito vetoed. Himari thought of a more feasible plan. Since the rumor was that Saito and Akane were dating and living together, showing everyone the opposite situation should work. The next day, Saito was glued to Shisei again, but since he was usually close to Shisei, it wasn't unusual to others. They needed a more drastic approach. Shisei moved in to kiss her brother, but Saito refused. Next, Maho pretended to be the girlfriend, but Saito, having been burned too many times, disagreed. This left only Himari as the candidate. She was more than willing and immediately agreed to play the girlfriend role wholeheartedly. However, Akane felt uncomfortable hearing this and kept reminding Saito that their acting as a couple was a necessity and he must not develop real feelings. Saito asked her to set boundaries for him, like hugging or kissing. Surprisingly, Akane said she was okay with all of it, but in return, Saito would owe her physically. The next day, Saito and Himari stuck close together. Himari fully embraced her role, and their classmates indeed noticed. Himari also took this pretend girlfriend scenario as an opportunity to fulfill her own desires. Before class, she took Saito to an empty classroom to do what couples do, although she wasn't sure what that should be. Eventually, blushing, she asked Saito for a hug. Because Saito often hugged Shisei, Himari couldn't help but feel envious each time she saw them. Gentle Saito, of course, aimed to please his pretend girlfriend, so Himari sat on his lap, but still wasn't satisfied. She asked Saito to hug her tightly. Both new classmates were watching, which was part of their performance. However, Akane no longer cared and quietly enjoyed the moment. Sure enough, as soon as they left, a group of girls pulled Himari aside to ask about her relationship with Saito. Himari took this chance to reveal that she and Saito were indeed dating, and that her previous comment about Saito and Akane living together was just a joke. The classmates believed her, but Akane felt uneasy. Following this, the two acted as a couple, sticking together daily. Akane found an opportunity to remind Himari not to overdo it. However, Himari ignored the advice, claiming that being overly affectionate was necessary to dispel the rumor. It seemed she was determined to see this plan through. Saito and Himari's relationship grew closer, and they even went on dates after school. Himari invited Saito to her house for tea, and he agreed. Surprisingly, Himari had Saito's photo on her desk, but he didn't mind. While drinking tea, they checked their class chat and found everyone gossiping about them. The plan had worked perfectly. Saito complimented Himari on her brilliance and noticed the psychology books on her shelf. He asked if she was interested in psychology. Himari shared her experience of being bullied as a child and how Akane had stood up for her. She didn't want to always rely on Akane, so she studied psychology to understand how to avoid being targeted, how to make others like them, and how to control social atmospheres. It sounded manipulative, but Saito didn't see it that way. He respected her willingness to go to such lengths for a friend. Touched by Saito's kindness, Himari couldn't let go, and asked if he had romantic feelings for Akane, which he denied. Then, Himari posed seductively, asking if she also had a chance, even if just as a mistress. Saito disliked seeing her demean herself, but they shared the bond of being unliked by their parents and seldom going home. After sharing these thoughts, Saito prepared to leave, but Himari grabbed him, pleading for him to stay longer. He didn't return home until evening, explaining to Akane that he had stayed at Himari's for a while. Akane was upset, especially after Himari called to say Saito had dinner at her place. Faced with this situation, Akane tried to persuade Himari to end their pretend relationship, but Himari disagreed. Even if it was fake, she valued being Saito's girlfriend, and even hoped it could last forever, unless it made Akane jealous. Akane couldn't admit her jealousy, so Himari naturally continued the charade with Saito, and Akane reluctantly agreed. Saito and Akane have been married for quite some time, yet had never exchanged contact information. When Saito suddenly remembered this and brought it up, Akane immediately became suspicious, accusing him of hitting on her. Saito was speechless. He just thought it would be more convenient for them to contact each other if they needed to buy something when they couldn't go shopping together. Reluctantly, Akane added Saito as a contact, though it was the first time she had added a boy's contact information. Once added, she got excited and, despite being face-to-face, began sending Saito a flurry of messages, eventually running back to her room to make a voice call to him. Lately, Saito had been pestered by Akane's sister, Maho, who playfully attacked him daily. One day, Saito revisited a question he had asked before about a girl he met at a party when he was young, wondering if Maho knew her. Maho still refused to divulge any information, even though Saito said he'd do anything for her. Even if he found out who the girl was, Saito wouldn't go out of his way to look for her or cause trouble for Maho. He just wanted an answer. The guests at that party were acquaintances of his grandfather, and both Maho and Akane, as the granddaughters of his grandfather's first love, could have been there. However, the girl was gentle and ladylike, with an angelic smile, definitely not matching either sister. Seeing Saito's eagerness to know more, Maho teased him, asking him to hug her tightly, only to become shy when he actually tried to do so. At that moment, Shisei stepped in to help and quickly took Maho away. Following this, Saito began receiving a barrage of messages from Akane. After school, Saito received a video call from his grandfather, reminding him not to forget to attend his great-aunt's 70th birthday next Saturday. Saito's great-aunt, his grandfather's cousin, had single-handedly suppressed troublesome figures in the family business. If Saito wanted to inherit the family business, he needed to maintain a good relationship with her. He asked Akane if she wanted to go with him and meet his relatives, which instantly made her blush, as it seemed like acknowledging their marriage. Tsundere Akane flatly refused to go, especially after hearing that Shisei's mother would also be there. However, Saito was concerned that Akane might feel lonely at home since he would be staying overnight. Akane reluctantly said it was fine, and besides, she could invite her friend Himari over. So, on the weekend, Akane saw Saito off as he left with his family. Upon their arrival at the old family home, the servants lined up at the door to welcome them back. Saito joked that he wasn't really coming back, to which his aunt, beaming, told him that to the main family, he was like a son. She even mentioned that her father had once intended to adopt Saito. After presenting their gifts to the great aunt, the elderly relatives noticed that Saito's new wife was absent and inquired about it. Saito explained that his wife was too shy to come, but their reaction seemed quite pleased with the marriage, even hoping for grandchildren soon. Then, the great aunt changed the subject, mentioning she had always thought Saito would marry Shisei. Saito instinctively laughed it off, but turned to find Shisei blushing, a new and unexpected reaction from her. She remained shaky until dinner and ended up using aggression to mask her embarrassment, eventually lying back down on her brother's lap. On the other hand, Akane felt very lonely at home alone, so she invited her friend Himari over. As soon as Himari arrived, She hugged Akane tightly. She had thought that her attempts to flirt with Saito might have made Akane dislike her. However, Akane wouldn't dislike her best friend, especially since Himari had been trying hard to help them cover up their marriage. Hearing this, Himari felt relieved and asked for a promise that whatever happens, they will always remain best friends. Together, they went to the kitchen to make cupcakes, enjoying a very relaxing and joyful afternoon, which helped Akane temporarily forget her troubles. When the cupcakes were ready, Himari couldn't wait to take photos to send to Saito, mentioning she had exchanged contact information with him a long time ago. Seeing Akane's slightly annoyed expression, Himari quickly asked if she should delete it. Akane hurriedly said there was no need, and Himari then shared her chat history with Saito, revealing she had sent him quite bold photos. After all, pursuing someone like him required bold moves, but Saito completely ignored her. For Himari, not being blocked was a victory. Soon Saito replied, praising the cupcakes. They chatted back and forth, making Akane uncomfortable as she hadn't received a reply from Saito yet. Himari saw right through Akane, asking her if she knew what the opposite of liking someone was. Akane instinctively answered dislike, but the actual answer was indifference. If someone is truly indifferent, they wouldn't even bother to dislike. This caused Akane to waver slightly, but fortunately Himari didn't press her further. After parting in the evening, Akane returned to her room to study, but soon felt lonely again. Meanwhile, Saito was dealing with a crowd of elderly relatives. Seeing Shisei had fallen asleep, he carried his sister back to her room to rest. After declining the maid's request to stay overnight, Saito went to the study, but suddenly received a call from Akane. She said they hadn't argued today and she couldn't calm down, so she called specifically to have an argument. After saying this, she couldn't help but express her hope that Saito would come home soon. That night, Akane lay in bed with her headphones on, deep in thought, when she heard a noise on the balcony. Picking up a frying pan from beside her bed, she cautiously approached, only to find Saito there. The door was locked, and he couldn't enter through the entrance. He had rung the bell several times, but Akane didn't hear it, so he had no choice but to climb through the window. Akane asked if he wasn't supposed to stay the night, wondering why he had come back so soon. Saito had initially planned to stay, but after hearing what Akane said, how could he remain indifferent? He had taken a bus back, and when he missed the last bus, he had to walk the rest of the way. He also felt he couldn't settle down without arguing with Akane. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Saito quickly went to take a shower to hide his embarrassment, while Akane obediently went back to bed to wait for him. Saito didn't want to talk much, and turned his back to her to sleep as soon as he got into bed. Akane quietly whispered, "Welcome home," in his ear, and then lay down beside him. Unbeknownst to her, Saito wasn't asleep, and felt that Akane's voice when she spoke just then was eerily familiar, much like the girl he had met at the party. Early in the morning, Akane was squatting by the bed watching Saito sleep. When Saito woke up, he was almost scared into fainting again. He felt that Akane had been acting increasingly strange lately. Today, she even invited him to watch a movie and had specially baked cookies. However, Saito did not respond and instead started playing with his phone, flirting with Himari on a messaging app. Mentioning this made Akane furious because Saito was chatting with Himari so intimately behind her back. This reaction made Saito wonder if she was jealous, so he directly asked her if their first meeting was in high school. If so, why had she greeted him with "long time no see" on the first day of school? Akane became agitated when he brought this up, made an excuse, and returned to her room. Indeed, she was the girl Saito had never forgotten. At that party, Akane had attended with her grandmother. Uncomfortable with the setting, she had gone to the terrace alone where she met Saito, the party's main guest. Disliking the party atmosphere, they had started talking, discussing everything from stars and moons to poetry and life goals, and had parted reluctantly. During the high school entrance exams that winter, Akane had studied harder to get into the same high school as Saito. When school started, she gathered her courage to greet him, but Saito had asked her who she was. Since that day, Akane had been confrontational with Saito. So, when he mentioned their initial meeting today, it upset her again. Although Saito did not understand why her mood had suddenly dropped, he said he would prepare dinner to let Akane rest. He then turned around and resumed flirting with Himari. Saito had met Himari when he went out to buy groceries and saw her being harassed by some hooligans. He stepped in to heroically save her and even claimed to be Himari's boyfriend, which made her, already fond of him, fall for him even more. As it was getting dark, Saito urged Himari to go home, but she said she did not want to return because her father's wife was at home, and she preferred to spend time outside. Saito empathized with her, but Himari assured him she was fine and told him to go back and keep Akane company. Still, Saito was worried about leaving Himari alone outside. His kindness made Himari unable to let go, and she impulsively kissed him deeply. The next day at school, Saito looked preoccupied. His sisters, Shisei and Maho, pressed him about what was wrong. Just then, Himari walked over. Hearing that they were questioning Saito about who he had kissed, Himari requested to be alone with him for a while. The sisters discreetly left, and Himari naturally continued talking about the previous night. Learning it was Saito's first kiss thrilled her, and she even asked if he wanted to do it again. Although Saito refused, his expression betrayed him. As soon as Akane entered the classroom, she heard some girls discussing Saito and Himari kissing, and there were even photos. She immediately ran out to confront Saito, but encountered Himari first, who provocatively taunted her. Despite this, Akane said nothing and went home, recalling her childhood scenes with Himari, where they had vowed to be lifelong friends. Now, were they to become rivals over a boy? When Saito returned, he brought Akane her favorite strawberry dessert as a gift, hoping to improve her mood. Touched to tears, Akane realized things couldn't continue this way and called Himari to meet. They went to the park where they played as children. Himari knew why Akane had called her. Indeed, Akane's first words were asking her to break up with Saito and stop pretending to be a couple. Himari retorted with a smirk, asking if Akane intended to use her and then cast her aside. Akane was at a loss for words. Himari's behavior had deviated from their initial plan of pretending. She was clinging to Saito, going on dates and even kissing him, which seemed like a real relationship. Himari felt there was no issue since Saito and Akane's marriage was only formal. Speechless, Akane finally admitted she loved Saito, thinking this would make Himari back off. However, Himari responded by asking, "So what?" She reminded Akane that she had always claimed to dislike Saito, unlike herself, who had loved him since first grade, and still did. Akane blurted out her love as well, but questioned why she should have to give Saito up. Akane countered that she had met Saito at a party when she was 12 and had looked forward to reuniting with him in high school. Revealing this only angered Himari more, knowing Akane had early advantages due to her grandmother's connections, using her family's influence to secure a marriage with Saito. If not for others' help, Akane might not have managed to speak normally with Saito. Himari's words were harsh, and Akane responded in kind. As longtime friends, they knew exactly what to say to hurt each other. Finally, Akane tearfully asked why Himari had to like the same person as her, to which Himari returned the question, knowing Akane had liked Saito for a long time because she seldom talked to boys frequently and would be listless when Saito was absent. Himari had considered using psychology to make Saito like her without anyone noticing, but felt it was unfair to both Saito and Akane. If Akane discovered Saito had been taken from her unknowingly, she would regret it for life and never forgive her, ending their friendship. Himari didn't want that outcome. The fake girlfriend plan was meant to make Akane realize her feelings for Saito while satisfying her own desires. However, her feelings for Saito were becoming harder to suppress. They both laid their cards on the table, with Himari promising neither she nor Saito were willing to give up, and Akane felt the same. So they agreed to compete fairly, and whoever won would hopefully be forgiven. Meanwhile, Saito and Akane's lively cohabitation continued. Whenever Saito accidentally upset Akane, he would seek advice from his sisters. Himari would seize any chance to stir the waters and grab opportunities to date Saito. Now, Akane no longer pretended to be indifferent, interacting with Himari without reservations. Saito didn't understand what had changed, but felt maybe this wasn't such a bad turn of events.